What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, we're going to be officially diving into the Week 1 content, less than 7 days away from the Thursday night game. And so in today's video, I'm going to be going through my running back start sits, going to be breaking down every single matchup, talking about every fantasy relevant running back, and then listing them as either a start, fringe option, or a sit. The starts are going to be the running backs you trust as like your RB1s, your RB2s, guys that are pretty much locks in your lineup. The fringe options, more of like your flex plays at running back. Maybe if you kind of punted the position, these are guys that are like desperate RB2 options. And then sits, pretty self-explanatory, guys that you would prefer to keep on your bench. So today, tomorrow, I'll have my running back start sits and then my wide receiver start sits. And then a few days after that, I'll actually go through and have like my official rankings for week 1. I do like to start sits just to kind of touch on every backfield. And I think week 1, there's just the most uncertainty. We're not quite sure how good every defense is going to be. Some of these backfields are still kind of up in the air in terms of usage. So this should be a fun one. If you guys enjoy, hit the like button, subscribe. Any questions, feel free to drop them down below. But let's just dive right into the first matchup here. Thursday Night Football, we have the Cowboys taking on the Eagles. And the Cowboys are one of these backfields where we're not quite sure what the usage is going to look like. At this point, it does seem like Javonte Williams is going to be the running back one to start off the season, but we still could get some Jaden Blue, some Miles Sanders. This is also a pretty tough week 1 matchup here. So I have Javonte as a fringe option. I think just in terms of like getting volume on a decent offense, I do think he's playable as like an RB3, but I certainly wouldn't be starting him with like a ton of confidence. And then I will be sitting Jaden Blue, Miles Sanders. I think Jaden Blue could kind of emerge throughout the season, but week 1, he's been banged up throughout training camp. He will be a sit for me. For the Eagles, don't have to spend a ton of time on this one. Obviously, you are starting Saquon Barkley. Then I believe this is the Friday night game. We have the Chiefs taking on the Chargers. For the Chiefs, I'm going to list Isaiah Pacheco as a fringe option. I think he could certainly emerge as a very solid start. I do think he's kind of on the edge there as like a higher end running back 3, but I do think we're going to see a lot of these running backs involved. Kareem Hunt mixing in, potentially near the goal line. Brashard Smith, working in, especially as a pass catcher. Not the best matchup here against the Chargers, so Pacheco is going to be a fringe play for me. I think it'll be really interesting to see what his usage does look like because we've seen stretches, before his injury where he looked like he could be a fantasy RB1. When he came back last year, really struggled and wasn't even the first option. So excited to see what this running back room looks like. Then for the Chargers, I think early on in the offseason, especially when they signed Najee Harris, there could have been reasonable concerns about starting Amarion Hampton in week 1, but the fact that Najee's barely been able to practice, Hampton round 1 pick, clearly talented, I would be shocked if he wasn't a clear-cut RB1 here in the first week. So for me, I have Amarion Hampton as a start, and then I will be sitting Najee Harris. I felt like Hampton would build throughout the season, but I feel like he just has this runway right now where he can step in week 1 and be a really strong option. Then I believe we are moving over to the Sunday games where we have the Buccaneers taking on the Falcons. Both of these are pretty easy for me. We are starting the 2 studs, that is Bucky Irving, Bijan Robinson, sitting Rashad White, and Tyler Algier, more of handcuffs for those 2. Then we have the Bengals taking on the Browns. For the Bengals, this one's also pretty easy, starting Chase Brown. I do think it'll be interesting to see how involved Samaje Perine and Taj Brooks are. Obviously, last year, once Zach Moss went down, Chase Brown was operating as the clear workhorse. Will he maintain that usage this year? That's still up in the air. But even if he doesn't, he's still going to be the clear-cut RB1 on one of the best offenses in the NFL. Then for the Browns, this is a running back room that I'm just kind of fading week 1. I think we could see a really solid split between Jerome Ford and Dylan Sampson. This is not an offense I'm super excited about. And just so week 1, one of these guys might emerge, but with no bye weeks, minimal injuries, I would hope you have better options at the running back position. Like I said, I do think Sampson could, potentially break away as the running back 1. We'll see when Judkins kind of gets in the mix here, but ideally you're going a different direction here in the first week. Then we're going to have the Dolphins taking on the Colts. This one's also pretty easy for me. For the Dolphins, I'm starting Devon Achane. Seems like he is trending to play with that calf injury. I really like Ollie Gordon as a handcuff. If Achane has some sort of setback, Gordon is really interesting in week 1 because you have Jalen Wright, who's going to be missing some time. But if Achane is active and playing, he will be a start for me. And then for the Colts, this one is easy. You are obviously firing up Jonathan Taylor. Moving over to the Panthers taking on the Jaguars. For the Panthers, I'm going to list Chuba as a start. I do think there's some risk of Rico Dowdle, Trevor Etienne kind of eating into his usage, but he was the workhorse down the stretch last year. He got an extension during the 2024 season. I think at least early on in the season, he will be the clear-cut running back one, and that definitely deems him to be a start here in the first week. Then for the Jaguars, definitely one of these backfields that is very up in the air. You have Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby, who are probably going to get most of the work early on in the season. I really like Bashal Tutin as like a running back sleeper, potential second half breakout. I think it's also possible that one of these running backs gets moved before week one. But as of right now, I'm going to have Travis Etienne as a fringe option and then sitting Tank Bigsby and Bashal Tutin. I just think if Etienne and Bigsby are like the top two running backs to start off the season, I like Etienne's role as a pass catcher, where Tank Bigsby, maybe he has more touchdown upside, but he's probably not going to be super involved in the pass game. At least Etienne can, get some on the ground, get some through the air. So he's going to be a fringe option for me. And then sitting Tank Bigsby and Bashal Tutin, but definitely interested in seeing how that backfield kind of shakes out. Then we're going to have the Raiders taking on the Patriots. For the Raiders, I know Ashton Genty's a rookie. I don't care. He is going to be a locked-in start, clear-cut running back one, three-down workhorse potential. Then for the Patriots, this might be controversial. I have Travion Henderson listed as a start, and I have Ramondre Stevenson listed as a sit. Henderson has been getting a ton of hype out of camp. I do think he's just their clear-cut, most talented running back. Now, I still think Ramondre is going to be involved. It might be a 55-45 split, a 60-40 split, but I like Henderson's receiving upside. I'm not completely sold that this offense is just going to be like firing on all cylinders right out of the gate, so I don't really love the idea of starting like the running back two, even in like a 1A, 1B split. So Henderson, more of like that back-end RB2 option, and then Ramondre would prefer to sit him this week, but another backfield, really interested in seeing how it shakes out. And I'm just really high on Henderson, so I hope he comes out, has a really strong week one. Now we're going to have the Cardinals taking on the Saints. For the Cardinals here, I know Trey Benson's been getting a lot of hype. He's going to be more involved. That might be the case, but I still think James Conner is going to be the clear-cut running back one. Just continues to log really solid seasons, both from a real-life perspective and fantasy football. So James Conner is a start. Trey Benson is a sit. And then for the Saints, Alvin Kamara here is going to be a start. I'm probably a little bit lower on him than consensus, but over the last few years, he has been a monster early on in the season, has really kind of fallen off in the second half, but early on, he's been like a 20-plus point per game guy. They're going to be trailing a lot of matchups. That's going to open up a lot of his receiving upside. Kamara is certainly a start here in week one. Now we're going to have the Steelers taking on the Jets. Steelers backfield, kind of interesting. The way I'm looking at this kind of committee here with Jaylen Warren and Caleb Johnson is I think Warren's going to be the better option early on in the season, and then Caleb Johnson probably builds as we get later on. So week one, I do prefer Jaylen Warren. He's very competent in pass protection. I think he's going to have the trust of the coaching staff early on. So he's going to be a fringe option for me as like a high-end RB3. And then I wouldn't love playing Caleb Johnson here in week one. If you're desperate, I get it, but ideally you would have another option. And then for the Jets, I do think we're going to see all three of these running backs involved. I do think Breece Hall is going to be the clear-cut RB1, but you're probably going to get Braylon Allen working it on early downs. Isaiah Davis might be frustrating, but like 2-minute drill, third down snaps, that would really cut into the upside of Breece Hall. But I'm a believer in the player, and I still think Breece Hall is a solid RB2 to start off the season. Then we have kind of a gross matchup at the running back position at the Giants taking on the Commanders. I think two backfields that are kind of ambiguous heading into week one. For the Giants, I do think Tyrone Tracy is going to start off as the running back one. He had that role last year. Cam Scatabo coming in as a rookie, has been banged up throughout training camp. I do think you can make the case that like Tyrone Tracy is a fringe RB2. I would consider him more of like a high-end RB3 this week, but I do think he is going to start off as the running back one. Still expect to see some Cam Scatabo, but I do think Tracy's going to be the much better option, at least early on in the season. And then for the Commanders here, we have Bill Krosky-Merritt getting a ton of hype. He is shooting up draft boards. But when you look at his like projections, his betting lines for week one, they are pretty weak. Like, they are not expecting him to be a big factor in this offense. I think Austin Eckler is the only guy week one I'd feel comfortable putting into my lineup. He's going to get work on the ground. He's going to be very involved as a pass catcher. He really is just like the adult in this running back room. And so I do think Krosky Merritt could build on his role throughout the season. But week one, Austin Eckler, he's going to be a fringe play for me as like an RB3. Bill Krosky Merritt, Chris Rodriguez would prefer to sit these guys and then just kind of reevaluate after we look at the week one usage. Moving over to the Titans taking on the Broncos. With Tajay Spears missing time to start off the season, Tony Pollard is just going to be locked in as a workhorse. I think you could make the case that he's like a potential top 12 running back early on in the season just based on his projected volume. You're hoping Cam Ward comes out, looks good. Obviously a tough matchup here against the Broncos, but I still think just based on the workload, he has to be a start for you. And then for the Broncos, really interested in seeing what this running back split looks like. Imagine J.K. Dobbins kind of has the edge early on in the season, but I still think R.J. Harvey's going to work in, and he doesn't need a massive workload to produce. Like, he is one of these dudes that can come in, rip off a big play, and he's going to be playable in fantasy just based on like a 50-yard touchdown run, a big reception. So both of them are fringe options for me as like RB3s. Then we are going to have the Niners taking on the Seahawks. For the Niners here, we're not getting cute. CMC, obviously a lock in your lineup. I don't expect B-Rob to be fantasy relevant, barring an injury to CMC. And then for the Seahawks, I know Zach Charbonnet has been getting a lot of hype. There's been a lot of steam about him like potentially pushing for a committee. I'm kind of hesitant to buy into that. I still think Kenneth Walker, if healthy, is going to be the running back one. He's been back at practice. Looks like he's healthy going into week one. Seems like they were just kind of playing it safe there. When you look at like the projections, the betting lines, they kind of back that up with Kenneth Walker looking like the clear-cut RB1. So Walker's going to be the start. We just really haven't seen when both these guys have been healthy, Zach Charbonnet like meaningfully cut into his usage. So until we see that, I'm going to operate like Kenneth Walker's the running back one, and then Zach Charbonnet is more of like that handcuff RB2 option on the team, would be a sit here in the first week. Then we have a divisional matchup between the Lions and the Packers. For the Lions here, I think Jahmyr Gibbs is a very strong start, high-end running back one. I have David Montgomery as a fringe play. This is not an amazing matchup here against the Packers. Lions are actually kind of middle of the pack in terms of implied points, which is something you did not see a lot of last year. And so, yeah, Montgomery is probably like a higher-end RB3, but with no bye weeks, minimal injuries, just him operating as the second running back on this team, it's tough for me to lock him in as like a top 24 option or like an RB2 or better. And then for the Packers, my guy Marshawn Lloyd just cannot stay healthy. So Josh Jacobs has a very clear runway to just pick up where he left off last year. He is going to be a very strong start as a running back one. Then we're going to have the Texans taking on the Rams. And for the Texans, I like taking stabs at all three of these dudes in like the later rounds. Nick Chubb, Dameon Pierce, Woody Marks. Joe Mixon's injury really could linger. We have no idea he is going to break out, but you cannot pay me to start any of these dudes in week one. Please do not play Nick Chubb, Dameon Pierce, Woody Marks. One of them might have a decent game, but you just have no clue. And it's also possible that like you have Nick Chubb taking 40% of the opportunities, Pierce is taking 40, and then Woody Marks is taking 20, and it's just like a disgusting running back split. Would really fade this offense, or at least the running back room here in week one. And then for the Rams, I do have Kyren Williams here as a start. I'm a little bit lower on him than consensus. I do think we're going to see more Blake Corum, more Jarquez Hunter. I don't think he's going to have the same opportunity share as last year. I think it's backed up by the draft capital they've put in some of these depth running backs, and then also just some of the reports we've gotten, some quotes from McVay, their GM. But I still think Kyren is going to be a really strong start, good offense, even if he's more in like that 65% opportunity share. Maybe he's not pushing to be a mid to high end RB1, but still someone who should be like at worst an RB2 option with that type of usage. And then I believe this is the Sunday night game. We have the Ravens taking on the Bills. Really fun matchup here. This one's pretty easy. You're obviously firing up Derrick Henry, sitting Justice Hill. For the Bills, you are firing up James Cook, and you are sitting Ray Davis. And then the Monday night game, divisional matchup here between the Vikings and the Bears. For the Vikings, I'm starting Aaron Jones. I know some people think Jordan Mason's really going to push for a committee here. Even if there is a solid split, I still think Aaron Jones just is going to be involved as a pass catcher. Was very solid last year. Like, it's not like he showed real signs of falling off. I do think he's a solid RB2 play in week one. And then for the Bears, I will be starting DeAndre Swift. You just look at this running back room, and unless they make a move, like who else is getting those opportunities besides DeAndre Swift? Kyle Monungai looks like he might be the RB2 at this point, but you have Swift getting involved as a pass catcher. I think this is a fun offense with a lot of upside. As a Bears fan, obviously excited to see how they look in week one, but I do think DeAndre Swift is like a nice back-end RB2 option. And so that is going to wrap it up for every single matchup here. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe. If you did stay to the end, I actually have a question for you guys. So in previous years, I had done these start-sit videos for like running backs and wide receivers, I believe on Tuesday, like after that Monday night game. And then Wednesday or Thursday, I would come out with my overall rankings for those positions. Last year, I changed it up and I just like immediately went into rankings where I think I would do like my top 24 on Tuesday and then maybe update them on Thursday. I'm interested like which direction you guys would prefer. I kind of like doing the start sits because I really get to, touch on every single backfield, kind of recap some of the usage. But last year I got a lot of comments telling me to just go right into the rankings. So let me know your thoughts if you guys are hearing this. But thank you all for stopping by. Stay tuned for the wide receiver start sits tomorrow, and I will see you guys in the next one.